Hello again. Well. Big moves and shifts in politics of the world. Obviously, this recent stunning victory in the United States, in Canada. Big shifts, big cracks in the regime. Further cracks are forming day by day. Our finance minister not only resigned right before delivering, the idea of how we're going to be spending our money going forward in Canada, but also wrote, I suppose the word that is floating around in the media, wrote a scathing letter criticizing the Prime Minister, who, for a while now, I have not been a fan of. So big shifts in politics, big shifts in the energy of the world, big questions being asked, and much more shifts to come in short order. So get ready. Today I wanted to speak about resistance, gratitude, and impermanence. My own portions of resistance have been challenged recently. I have challenged myself to examine them, to start to move through them, address them, and organize them so they can be dispersed. We all have resistance in our lives. Sometimes it's things that are conscious that we just can't get to, or we can't solve, or we can't move in our life, even if we keep trying. Sometimes it's unconscious and we come up with many reasons, sometimes very practical, logical reasons not to address that resistance. Sometimes it's just some kind of work that needs to be done in the physical world. And sometimes it's internal work, emotional work that needs to be done in your own personal world. I've had a great deal of resistance to clearing and cleaning my house in a deep way. Every surface, every item, and particularly the back room of my home that is currently filled with some items from my childhood, but particularly a bunch of boxes of my parents' old possessions. Every box is filled with memories of the past that bring me back to, well, at least force me to move through in my memory and my emotions, move through recent difficult parts of my life. A bunch of years dealing with my parents being sick and dying, different relationships that became tumultuous or conflictual or betrayals, all these kinds of things. Since I broke up with a long-term girlfriend that I dated for about 10 years, it catalyzed this huge period of change, rapid change. I probably changed more for the better in my life in the last year and a half than I had for the previous 20 years of my life. And it was time, and I stepped forward and I jumped headfirst into my resistance, into change, and have made incredible headway. With the help of a sibling, and to a lesser degree, the girlfriend that I dated for a number of years, I cleared and organized, dispersed, I suppose, the lion's share of my parents' stuff. There's probably 4 or 5 times the amount of boxes and stuff that there is in the back room currently, and slowly, over the years, particularly my sibling and I, addressed it, dispersed it, threw it out, donated it, and kept a few things to be of use. But I've had great difficulty, great resistance going and doing this clearing and organizing and emotional processing on my own. And so recently, within the last handful of weeks, I tried to engage in some practice, some milder resistance, and clear and organize my workshop, my middle room in the house, which is where I'm filming now. There was layers and layers of mess and disorganization and kind of the residue or dust of trauma, because it was a place that I would go to engage in creative distraction, engagement, while I was trying to help my folks at the end of their life and didn't know what else to do. Very few other activities would hold my attention, would give me that much needed distraction. And I was very grateful for the workshop, which got messier and messier. And in this last year and a half, I stepped into the workshop many times. I looked at all the items that were strewn about and strategized about how I was going to organize it and what I was going to do, and I just could not do it. I just couldn't do it. I would try, I'd move a few things, and I just ultimately became paralyzed in that resistance. So it was time, recent weeks, I tackled it. And I've completed the organization. I've thrown out a lot of stuff. I put everything in its correct place, made a lot of detailed labels, got some shelves, cleared the center space, and it was hard, but it felt very good. I moved through and addressed that resistance. We accumulate so much stuff in our life. Some of it seems very meaningful, but none of it we can take with us, and often it's the people that love us that are left with it once we move on to the next thing after our last breath. That can be very difficult. I've known some people that have addressed their loved one's old stuff by just kind of turning the volume of their heart down and getting very practical and just organizing, throwing out, and just plowing through it. Now, I'm just not quite built that way. I see things, I feel things, memories come up, and I actually want to be able to do that. I want to go through that fire, that difficult process of feeling, remembering, and eventually getting to the point where it doesn't hurt so much, where I can remember both long time ago, the good times, the connected times, the easier times, and even more recently, the difficult times, without that pain, without that barrier, that force that kind of stops you or causes you to kind of crush it down, push it aside, and distract yourself in some unhealthy way. I want to move through that fire. I want to walk through it on purpose. And so one of the things that I found in my workshop was a pile of old cards. My family had a tradition of getting cards on special occasions like birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, and we would carefully choose cards. We would take time to choose the cards, and we would look at the picture and whatever the inscription that came with the card was, and we would riff on it. We would write a paragraph or two, maybe a poem, or just something authentic and touching to honor the person that the card was intended for. So I went through cards from 2010 to 2014. I think there was a few from 2016. It was difficult. I got a little misty-eyed. I think maybe even a little bit of salty liquid might have trickled down my cheek at a certain point. But it was good. I took the time, I felt it all, and I dispersed it. And now I'm sitting in a functional, organized space. When we organize our external space, especially our home, it helps organize our internal space, our heart, our spirit, and our mind. And this is all in preparation for that big task of the back room. Now, I have already taken one box out of my back room. It was filled with my mother's stuff, a bunch of her manuals from learning about her particular style of Buddhism, Dzogchen, that she undertook towards the end of her life to learn about and get different certifications in. And I found a stack of papers that were certifications for other forms of training, right back to the 90s in her life. She was a psychotherapist. She was constantly seeking out new skills, new understanding so that she could help people. It was her passion to help people look at their trauma, find their resistance, face it, and sort it out. And she was very good at it. She helped many people. But I'm sure that she felt something for them. I'm sure that they were something that made her proud, particularly for the skills that she was able to bring from those experiences that the papers represented. So I decided I was going to bring the fire of change, at least to these prize possessions that she had. And so a ritual of burning has been undertaken. It can feel particularly cathartic with certain things when you burn them, as we do with our own bodies in many cases, as my mother's body was burned and my father's body was burned. It's a potent element, fire, to bring change and disperse old things that in their current form, before the fire touches them, does not serve us any longer. And I feel those old parts of me burning up. The world sometimes brings the fire of change into our life. We don't have much choice or control over it. And hopefully we have the discernment and internal strength to move through that fire with grace and patience. And sometimes we can bring the fire of change into our life with agency, which is what I've done in this case. More resistance to move through, a lot more tedious sorting of odds and ends, a lot more emotional processing and memories to re-engage with. But I'm grateful. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Everything will change eventually.